But to have the drive to be working on a project that's all that, all encompassing. I don't know how to live without having something like that. I've always got these different projects stacked where I've got, here's the long-term project. Here's the one that has to be done this month. Here's the one that's got, 6 months out or whatever. So, if I don't feel a little bit of panic, I don't think I'm doing it right.
Hey, how's it going? You are here for Heavy Art Talk. As usual, it's your host, Lee. And today I'm very excited. I'm sure a lot of you folks are aware of this artist. But I have Mark Rudolph joining me. Mark's been an illustrator and cartoonist for many years. He's been in many publications. He's worked with many bands. Just a couple credits to list out. His work is on the cover of the new Edge of Sanity demo collection that's coming out on Century Media soon. Of course, his work is in Decibel every month, which is always an exciting thing. Which band is he going to draw? He's done a lot of covers with Blood of the Gods, which is a really cool zine that features a lot of awesome illustration, and then also Wine, which is really cool. And then some bands: Paradise Lost, Black Dahlia, Carcass, Autopsy, just to name a couple. And the last thing is he has a book out right now called Profane Creations. I'm going to link that in the description below, but it's very easy to get. Without further ado, what's something you've been listening to lately?
Just did a road trip to Chicago, so I was listening to a lot of like Sisters of Mercy, NXS, Modern at the Gates, and everything post reunion, those last three records, classic Dismember stuff. It's kind of across the board all the time, but mostly, yeah. I would say mostly metal and metal adjacent stuff. I'll listen to jazz and stuff occasionally, but not, I've got to be in a certain kind of mind frame, I think. So I think ever since I started listening to metal, that's kind of like my, I don't know, my baseline. It just kind of like all the nervous energy or whatever that I have going on just kind of focuses when I listen to metal. So
awesome, man. Yeah, I feel very similarly. I find metal's great when I'm like driving or going to the gym. And I listen to it at home as well. But for me personally, it has to be kind of like a very atmospheric, proggy, or like kind of hypnotic type metal for when I'm like drawing and inking. For you, is it just any genre, or is there like a preference?
I guess it kind of depends on if it's something new I'm not familiar with. It might be distracting, but really the most focus when I'm kind of doing art is the initial drawing part, the initial sketching, kind of roughing out everything. When I'm inking, I can be, I can have like a YouTube video on in the background or a movie or something, so it's not too bad. But I know a lot of friends of mine who write or do art prefer to have like no word, like wordless, classical or like noise music or ambient kind of stuff. And like I could listen to both who are doing anything. So it's like it's just kind of like my DNA at this point. But that as far like when I'm doing any kind of like writing or critical, like really trying to brainstorm something, it's got to be something I know really, really well.
Interesting. Yeah, like I guess with like sketching and stuff, I'm maybe not as like I could have something that's on that's a little more chaotic, but for me, like with like inking, it's like sometimes it's very precise, and if I'm listening to something that's very fast and I'm like getting too excited, then it's like I rush the lines. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I can see that. So you're doing everything analog?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm similar to you, primarily like pen and ink artist at this point.
Yeah. Because I've gone through a lot of different phases trying to, in the early or probably mid 2000s, I started trying to use more digital tools. And then I had a lot of problems with crashes and glitchiness, and I wasn't making a ton of money, so I couldn't like buy the top end. I couldn't afford like a Wacom. So I started to basically take my stuff all the way back to everything's analog except for computer coloring. Scan it, color it in Photoshop, and it's gone. So I had an old iMac that was, oh God, it still works. It's in the garage, and it just wouldn't. I couldn't connect to the internet with it anymore. But I would use that old, Photoshop. So I try to keep everything. I'm even now doing airbrushing for shading. I think we have.
Dude, I
there's a
saw
slide,
that with the blood of gods. I was like, is he using
Yeah.
airbrush or like some marker effect? That's sick, dude. Nice.
So I found there's a YouTube channel called Cartoonist Kayfabe where they just talk about.
Huge fan.
Yeah, unfortunately lost Ed this year, but he started using Frisket, which I never heard of because I was doing masks with like sticky notes and low tack tape, and that Frisket you can just put right over the top, cut with an X-Acto knife, peel off, do what you need to do, and do multiple different things with it. And it's in the airbrush I got just to try out was like this $20 thing on Amazon that was like used to like do your nails and stuff, but it works great for what I need for like this early kind of phase. But I'd like to get more and more refined with that. So it's almost, I'm just doing flat colors in Photoshop or doing some kind of mask, and actually just airbrushing the entire thing would be cool. But it's really hard to tweak anything once it's all, all done that
But
way.
I like how you do it. Like it's like you're airbrushing in the values. So you have the whites pop and then there's a little that gray effect. And then you get like a natural little, that airbrush splatter, like the good stuff, you know what I mean? That like keeps it like lively. That's what I think about how you're using it.
I've tried some stuff in Procreate, a couple different, like retro screen prints and stuff. And it always kind of looks a little phony. And because I kind of came from I started, when I first started using like those kind of tools, probably in the early 90s in high school, we had a graphics program. We were actually doing, one of the projects was we had to do something in 4-color, turn it into 4-color plates, run it on the press, have at least 5 copies of it where everything lined up properly. And that's where you were taking Rubylith, which is like it's a clear, transparent, like a clear film with a red film on top of it. So you could go through and you could cut out all the spots that needed to be like, CMYK, all those different values, line them up with dots. So I kind of have all that ingrained in my head before I started using Photoshop at all. It's like in a lot of that stuff, like the dodge and burn tools, all from like analog photography. And that was stuff that I did then. So that stuff's always in my mind. And I try to pull in so that Frisket almost pulling back to like, 1991 graphics class or something. And I just love going like the tactile stuff, getting away from screens as much as I can. And drawing, because I'm 49. My eyes are not great right now. So I'm drawing twice or 3 times as big as usual, like 18 by 18 or 18 by 24. Huge things. I had to buy a bigger scanner just so I didn't have to cut it up into 6 pieces each time. But I find like
you still got to do like 2 pieces though.
Yeah.
With the scanner. Yeah.
Like the
I got a pretty big one too.
This one, I'm not sure how it's big enough. What is it like? I don't know, 16 by 24 or something, or 18 by 12 or it's a pretty good size one. But like Decibel, I do 11 by 15. So I can just stick that right on there, no problem. But I used to have to cut that one in half, piece it together in Photoshop and all that. But just drawing larger and analog is like been like getting really lost in the process has been great lately.
Do you like that scanner? Like beyond just the size? Like,
good. You want to know what it is?
Yeah, just in case I'm in the market. I like the one I have, but I am working bigger and bigger too. I have the Plus Tech. Okay, so you just got the bigger size.
What is this? Optics Slim 1180. What do I got on Amazon? I had good reviews.
I think I have the same thing, just a smaller size. I think so.
Okay, this is the biggest one I can find.
It can be a bit tough with like paintings. Like it'll sometimes bring the red out a bit more, but black and white and grayscale, it's perfect.
Yeah, this one I think is 14, maybe 14 by 19 or something. I'm not sure.
We have the same scanner.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've only had this for a couple months. I think maybe 3 months tops. I'm still getting used to having to push that scan button instead of just like doing everything through an interface. But so far so good. I just tweaked I don't like scanning in bitmap because my stuff's not high contrast enough. It kind of screws it a little bit. So I like to still do it at a grayscale and then kind of tweak everything in Photoshop with levels. But yeah, so far this thing's been pretty good.
Are you using it on a Mac, like in terms of the interface part?
Yeah.
For the scanner? Yeah, so like
action or something.
Yep. That like auto contrast and photo restoration works pretty well for me. Have you like hit that button? It makes it look better on my. Yeah, it's just like just a button, and then just see if it looks better. For anytime I scan, just with the default settings, it always makes my stuff look better than just how it raw looks after the first pass through.
Okay, yeah, I've had to tweak it quite a bit because I was noticing I was losing a lot of fine line work the way I had it set up, and so I had to go through and tweak it a little bit. But the first scanner I bought it was I think it was 93. My folks had a little bit of extra money set aside for college, and I decided I didn't want to go to college, so I bought a bunch of Mac stuff. I bought like a Performa, and my scanner was like $1,500 back then. And it was still just a small one, but everybody was like, oh my God, you got a scanner. It's unbelievable. Had a slide adapter and all this stuff on it. And these have finally come down to the point where I don't feel like I got to mortgage something to get them. You know, it's reasonable. I would love one bigger, but I don't see them. Any of the ones I see that are bigger have awful ratings on them.
Yeah. And then the cost just like it becomes exponential. You know,
I can't spend $1,000 on a scanner anymore. That's crazy. It's like almost as much as my computer.
One quick thing, when you're talking about the Frisket tape, or like I have it as well, but I don't, maybe I'm just bad with an X-Acto knife, but I find that kind of hard to do. Maybe just because I haven't built the muscle memory and like that skill of like putting it down and then cutting it and not being like, I don't know, I just feel like I'm really bad at it.
It's incredibly tedious, and I use this fresh blade every time.
Okay.
And don't press as I found this out the hard way. Like, don't press as hard as you think you need to. For that Blood of Gods cover that I think we have in the images to show at some point, I cut through the paper a couple times, so I had to put tape on the back of it. But the third or fourth time I did it, I found that just using maybe half the amount of pressure. So even if you don't cut all the way through, it mostly cuts, and you can kind of pop it off. Yeah. But it definitely takes I've had the hardest, like I used to use an analog brush, and I use kind of brush pens now, but I would squeeze the brush so hard I'd get a lot of tension kind of right in here. Yeah. And I find that happening when I'm doing that with the X-Acto, and I'd have to just kind of loosen up and let my whole arm kind of do it instead of clamping up on my hand.
I probably just haven't gotten the practice to it. I use like I'm doing more watercolor than airbrush at this point, and I use the masking fluid a lot. Just lay it down if I want to like do a wash.
Just kind of cold press paper or hot press paper?
Yeah, depends on the I lean more towards hot press because I could still lay down pen and ink and it not like just be super rough on the nibs. Yeah, because I'll do like a mixed media kind of look.
Yeah, I've looked at some of your stuff. I'm impressed. I'm not. I've never dipped my foot into painting much outside of a little bit of watercolor here and there, but it's more a raw look, or like a sepia tone, I think, kind of look. But I remember trying to use some of that mask, the liquid mask, on a piece that I was pretty happy with, and just tore the top layer of paper right off. So I was like, I don't think I'm going to risk using this stuff anymore. But I used to do like art in college, but
yeah. So have you shifted more towards brush pens now, like Tombow, like these kind of ones, instead of using
pen
just like
the color brush pens?
These?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like if these you can find the Japanese versions that have the ink slightly different.
Well, there's the micro brush one.
Yeah, I used to use those a lot. Now I can't get a good enough point on those.
Yeah.
But
I have to go for a thick line.
Yeah, I used to use Winsor Newton Series 7 brushes all the time. And I think they got bought out, or they're not, the quality of the brushes are pretty awful anymore. Because I remember the first time I bought one, it's probably early 2000s. It was like $38. And I was like, God, this better be good, because this is an expensive brush. And now you get them, and they all have stray hairs constantly, and it's just not worth it with the cleaning process and the line. I went to a rougher paper as well with the brush pen, and I can get a lot more kind of texture out of, like, dry brushy techniques and stuff too out of that too. Because I used to be a diehard, only nibs, only brushes, like real brushes dipping in ink, and then you dump ink on your paper a couple times, and or you have just this great brush, and then it shits the bed, and you've got to get a new one, and you can't get that line value that you've had on the whole rest of the piece. But
yeah, I like that too with these is like I'll have one on standby that's kind of a dry brush, like it's already really like kind of running low, like I haven't squeezed it, and then I'll have one that's like just that right amount, because if you over squeeze it, it could be pretty brutal. But yeah, like having a couple on standby for like different modes is pretty nice. Like whatever
I have,
look you're going for.
4 or 5 different ones. And I really tried to get good at squeezing just the right amount, because otherwise I'm just have a piece of scratch paper next to me and just kind of soaking it up, because it's almost worthless when it's too much, or when it's too dry I can work with it, but when it's too much it's just useless.
Oh man. But yeah, I mean, it seems like you're kind of the same boat. I love. I mean, you can talk about art in so many different ways, like what it means to you and all the emotional side and what compels you. But I do like nerding out about the technical stuff. Just like tools and stuff. I've always found that stuff interesting because it's the means to what you create.
Yeah, and like I kind of came from, I started listening to death metal probably 1991 or 2, and before that I'd listened to some heavy metal, Metallica, but none of the extreme stuff until hearing Bolt Thrower. But before that I was always more art-wise, I was more focused on comic books, and old comic book masters have the most archaic old drafting supplies that you can imagine, and I was trying to master or even figure out how the hell to use half of them. Like some of those ruling pens that's just it's like 2 parallel pieces of metal with a screw that you dip in, and you can like make a square line like a panel border with, that just look like crap forever. Like these guys really had to know how to, it was hard enough to draw that way, but then use the tools were so much harder as well. And so, yeah, me and some friends of mine were just trying to use all those tools, how to figure out how to use a nib, like a Hunts 102, without scratching the hell out of the paper. You had to let it glide across and not like dig into the paper. So yeah, I've had kind of a lifelong interest in different tools, but now I'm stuck on, I've been for the last how many years, I used to use nothing but Bristol board, and now I've been using just Canson recycled art paper. It's cheap, it's consistent, and it has a really good tooth to it, and that I can't find anything else. Bristol is it has too clean of a surface for me anymore to use. But they have that, the brush pens, and then those pit pens. I forget what brand it is.
Is it the Faber-Castell?
It might be. I think so. Because I tried microns. I used microns for years and years, and they would dry out, and they were the points seemed like too soft, where I couldn't really, I used them for, one drawing, and then it got too fat, or it didn't come out of there right or something. But those are great. And then, that's really almost all I use. Then I use the other Pentel, the other one that you just showed, I forget what it's called now.
The micro brush?
Black one? Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to use that exclusively. Now I use that for fills. Or I'll use just a regular brush for fills, because it's a nice opaque dark and it never smears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. Very similar tool set. But what I'm trying to do with each piece is like less and less relying on the micron, and more just like, that's one thing I love about your work, is just like all of your brush strokes are like very expressive and like very deliberate. You know what I mean? Like when I look, you have like great use of like contrast. I can tell you come from like a comic book background, which to me, I like that look more and more as I'm like, getting more and more experience, as opposed to the like, I don't know, just crazy, insanely detailed micron stuff, which I still do, but I'm like trying to be more and more like just bold, high contrast decisions, and like trying to get that more in my work. Like, Mike Mignola, Bernie Wrightson, like that kind of look over time. Yeah,
the control of some of those, like Mignola is a perfect example. I picked up a couple of his books recently, and I haven't read any of his stuff in a while, but just like his design sense is unbelievable, to be able to break down pure black and white like that in like a really emotive, abstract way. I've always found most of my inspiration comes from comic book artists, honestly. The only other, like, I enjoy a lot of the other stuff, like, Dan Seagrave and Christian Wall and a lot of the, Andreas Marshall, a lot of the classics, but it was never any kind of style that I could replicate. Most of these guys are like painters, and I do not have the sense. I've a good friend of mine who is an unbelievable painter, and the way, how much process he goes through, like stretching the canvas a certain way, and it's just this laborious process, but it's all based in history, and he just loves doing it. And I just like to put a piece of paper down with a pencil, do it.
Yeah.
Get the idea out as quickly as possible. Otherwise I dilute it and I don't think it looks as good. Because I'm sure you do this as well. Like you'll do like a rough that has so much more energy than your final piece. And the ultimate goal for me is try to get those roughs to look, you have that energy go into the pages later on, or the images or whatever I'm doing.
And I feel like you have to use a brush to get that energy, and you got to be good with it, because like Micron's good for the tight details, but it always stiffens in any experience I've ever had.
And it doesn't really hold up very long as far as art, like archival stuff. It seems to, even though it says it's an archival pen, if you use India inks or, I haven't seen it so much in the Pentel brush pens either, but those seem to hold up over, I've only got about 15 years of using them to hold it up to anything else, but they don't seem to fade as much sometimes as the Microns almost turn like a yellowish kind of black color over time. And I've got a handful of like original comic art pieces. I've got one, I don't think you can see it in my setup right now, but it's from an artist, Sal Buscema. He did Spider-Man for years and years in the 70s and 80s into the 90s. And just to see, his stuff was all done with a Hunts 102, but he had to get, an entire 28-page book done a month. So he's got that deadline style, but the way he abstracts trees and cars, and it's just to see all that, and like the notes, the blue line, all that on the page is just so, I don't know, that stuff super gets me excited to see all, and like these, are you familiar with any of the artist edition, like big comic book things?
Yeah, I have, I don't have the Todd McFarlane one, but I have, Bill Sienkiewicz. I have one of his, which is really, really neat.
To see all that stuff scanned in color and all the different layers, the mistakes, how they fix certain stuff, of like that's like an art history thing right there. That, because you see the final printed page, you don't see any of that. And a lot of people don't care about the process, but I love that as we're getting older, the stuff that's documenting all this stuff is so much more in depth than I could have ever imagined. I've got a, what the hell is it now? It's, I think it's Dark, or the Batman Year One. I have this thing that's the size of a coffee table. That's absolutely beautiful. All these original pages photographed in that thing. They're really hard to look at anywhere because they're so large. And what the hell would you store them? But I just love that we have that kind of stuff, and like metal books now. Like I've got in the other room, I've got an entire bookcase full of heavy metal books, and to think that 30 years ago, it was hard to even find magazines that would talk about this. Now we've got like, here's a book about Obituary and Celtic Frost and, Paradise Lost and all these other bands. It's just, I think we're in a great time for criticism of art and music,
Absolutely, man. Who are some of your favorite comic book artists then, or like maybe ones from childhood that have kind of persisted to still be some of your favorites?
I think my biggest, I never... I want, like, because I grew up in the 90s, so I was definitely part of the, Todd McFarlane and the Image Rob Liefeld and all that kind of Image stuff. And I liked it at the time. And I think I could understand what they were doing graphically at the time, more of like pulling in lots of detail. And I didn't really understand anatomy. Like, Liefeld, he couldn't draw a foot. He'd put a log in front of it or something. And then looking at like Jack Kirby back then, I thought like, this is boring. This is like blocky and weird. And then in my 20s, I discovered that this is like he's like as good as like a, some kind of modern painter that's completely like a Picasso, be able to break down the figure into these weird energetic shapes. And so originally I was more into the modern guys. And Mad Magazine was probably the biggest one. I loved the caricature in Mad Magazine and the exaggeration, but never in a million years I think I could ever do a caricature of anybody, because I could barely draw just a person anyways. I could draw like a guy in a mask or wrap a cape around him, but I didn't understand how any of that worked. But So like the longevity guys, Jack Davis, he did
absolutely
DC Comics. He's done like Time magazine covers. He did probably close to 100 TV Guide covers back in the day, and Johnny Cash album covers. He's done everything. Mort Drucker, who is another kind of prolific Mad magazine artist. He might have died just a handful of years ago, but he would do a lot of the movie parodies in Mad magazine from, I think, the late 70s up until the magazine kind of folded in the 2000s. Yeah, so those three is, and then as far as I said, like Seagrave, I think Ed Ripka was a big influence because he was kind of a cartoony, almost like horror movie poster kind of guy. I've always really dug his stuff. It kind of weirded me out that I found out he did most of his stuff digitally in the last 15 years, and I couldn't tell the difference. Like that's pretty amazing to me, but shows how
I
good
didn't
the guy
know that.
is. Yeah, I saw him do like a tutorial doing a digital cover. And I was like, holy crap, this is like, okay. And then Larry Carroll, are you familiar with did a lot of Slayer stuff? He did everything up until
okay.
It's like a collage style with painting and all that.
He's amazing. I didn't think of the name though.
Yeah, I had to look it up beforehand. I didn't want to say it wrong either, because I've always loved his stuff, and he didn't really do a whole lot of other band stuff. It was just, I don't even know how they came together. But before, because early on, I was a big comic book guy. Then death metal started, and then me and my buddy actually pulled out some visual aids here. We started the Requiem zine, 1992. That's the first issue. So I got more into like the graphic design and page layout kind of thing. I worked at Relapse for a little while doing design in '96. So I became like a graphic design guy, doing my own elements into it. And I don't think it was until, probably close to the early 2000s or mid 2000s, 2008, when I started doing like actually metal stuff. I was just doing comics up until then and in between. So the Decibel thing was a big deal.
When you're saying graphic design in '96, this is like you're not using computers, or were there programs you're using at the time?
There was I was working on like the Neurosis Through Silver and Blood album and like the ad campaign. So we would have to send a slide along with like coordinates, and then we'd print out the text that would go onto a big poster or something, and then send that off via FedEx. So it was a mix, but most of everything else was done with like Quark Express, the kind of precursor to InDesign. So we were doing a lot of at least at Relapse, we're doing a lot of that. And that's kind of how I learned from my last year in high school in '93. They just got a scanner in the graphics class and got Photoshop. And I remember I had this Dismember. Is it in here? I don't think it's in this issue, but it was a Dismember press photo. And I put it in the scanner and I scanned it at 150 DPI, and it took 45 minutes. Just
God.
Really slowly going across there. And so I started to figure out how to use that. And then when we started doing the magazine, that was just cut and paste with glue sticks. We took comic books and took the staples out to figure out how the pagination worked. And then we befriended people at a copy shop. We'd like buy them pizzas and they'd let us do free copies and use the computers. That's how I figured out how to use Quark. It was nuts. And I ended up working at newspapers and stuff after that with those skills, and would work on the magazine on, at work hours. I just blow through everything I need to do, these ad designs, and then, sit there and finish our magazine and link them on floppy disks and stuff. Is a wild time. And everything you can put on a thumb drive, it's insane.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit, but Decibel. So you started doing illustrations in 2008 for them?
I believe 2008 or early 2009. It was issue 52. Okay. We went to At the Gates had their first reunion show actually wrote it down because I have the ticket stub. It's in '08. And that's the first time we went to Philly and met Albert at the Decibel offices. And I brought a bunch of weird like 60s sci-fi comics I was doing at the time to him. And just like, man, if you ever, check this stuff out, if you ever need an illustration. And then he came back to me pretty quickly. And he's like, how would you like to do like a lead review illustration every month? And I was, kind of terrified. I was like, I can figure it out. And the first one is pretty awful. I probably spent 2 or 3 weeks on it, and it still looks like shit. It was like it was a napalm. It wasn't even a. I think I was going. It wasn't just a straight caricature of the bands. It was more of like Sepultura and Napalm Death. Where are they at now in the modern time? So it's like
Okay.
Andreas Kisser and Derek Green, and then Shane Embury and Barney, and the likenesses are pretty awful, but people seem to like it. And it was done in that I was using nib pens, brushes on Bristol board, so it's very stiff compared to
Okay.
my stuff now. But it's nice. I saw some of the stuff that you put up in the slides and like the different comparisons. I was like, it's always nice to see how much you've gotten better in 10 or 15 years, and it keeps going that arc. You know, you never want to see it go backwards.
Well, in terms of like the stiffness of your stuff back in like '08 when you were doing that first one, like, I mean, how much do you think it's just like how your mindset and your approach and experience has changed versus the tools you're using? Because like I feel like a lot of it's probably just like the mentality to like know the value of a loose but deliberate, drawing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it was letting some of those. I thought I had to use those tools, and when I started letting those specific tools go, it wasn't as much of a hardship to get that done, because that's always been my goal, is to try to be more fluid and expressive, and like the Mad Magazine stuff. Some of those guys would draw a figure that had a great head, and then the body was kind of just a weird gesture, but it all worked. All the simplification of the folds and everything made it work, and that's just been I think repetition as well. Because when was that? And I think in 2011, I started doing similar stuff for Metal Hammer UK, and I did how many years? I worked for them for 4 or 5 years, but their stuff was more like an editorial illustration. So each month it'd be like, how are the old guard and the new guard coming together, and how does that work? So it'd be this sprawling thing of like 20 or 30 characters that I was drawing, and I had to get it done quickly. And so some of those, I was doing on bond paper, and just doing a blue line, and just using, a brush pen on top of that. And I think a lot of that, kind of like having a fire under your ass to get the stuff done, really helped. Because we moved up, I've lived in the city in Detroit for about 11 years, and we moved up to northern rural Michigan. Like we're being broadcast from a pole barn in the middle of nowhere right now. But I just completely lost my train of thought on that. I was trying to go in these interesting directions. But where the hell was I going?
Were you saying timelines, loosening up? That's Metal Hammer.
Oh, just having. I think having it be like a crunch where I have to get this done and get paid, and it's got to be good enough to where I am going to get more work from it. So I know where I was going now. So getting that constant muscle memory was great, because now I have to split between, doing things with a large property. And if I don't draw for half a week and I sit down, and half the time I'm just throwing stuff in the trash, even though I've been doing this stuff for 30 years, and I've been really bad at doing, I don't know if you do like daily sketching or not, but I find that as long as I can get it in at least a couple times a week doing something, I'm good. But if I'm just cold for a week or 2 weeks, it is tough to jump back into it and still be happy with what I'm doing, and try to, kind of push myself a little bit.
No, I'm similar. I got back from Japan. That was 11 days. Actually, I did do some drawing on like the trains, but God, that was terrible, because I was like bumping up the train. It was like, oh, these look really bad. But it was a little, well, it was jet lag combined with being rusty, and I was like, oh man, do I still have it? Kind of felt like that for a couple days.
And I always, no matter where I'm going, I bring like an iPad with Procreate on it, a sketchbook, maybe a notebook, all this other crap, because I think I'm going to get something done. And half the time I never even pull the thing out, but it's like at this point, like a security blanket that it's always there just in case if something strikes me. But yeah, that's something I need to kind of get back into, a more regular, just sketching for fun and not just for work, I think is a big deal.
It's a tricky thing to do, because, I mean, at this point, I mean, you've been doing it so long, but you have at least one illustration you got to do for Decibel. But I mean, you're also very busy because you do seem to have your work in a lot of physical magazines and media more than like any other artist that I've interviewed, which is pretty cool. You got Blood of Gods, Decibel, and it just pops up all the time. Like, I see your work everywhere.
That's awesome to hear. I didn't put it into the art book at all because I just wanted to keep the metal related stuff in there. But I've done a lot of like stand-up comedy posters, improv stuff. Like the interesting thing about my style is I've just kind of left it out there. Like, this is kind of what I do, and it draws all kinds of different people to it. It's not just a one set thing, which is great. And I never thought that would have been the case. Because there's no way I could ever draw like, or paint like Seagrave or something. It's not in me. But I've been able to do, a handful of album covers and t-shirt designs for bands that, are, high school dream come trues, really. So that's been amazing. I think the print aspect that's kind of one, like Decibel has a great shirt that says, only print is real. But having a tangible image or a tangible thing of something you did has always been, I think, important to me too. Is doing the zine and stuff. Once we finished it, we had this thing to like pour over. Like, holy, we did all this in whatever it was, like 2 months or something. Stayed up till 3 a.m. every night. Still went to school each day. But to have the drive to be working on a project that's all that all encompassing. I don't know how to live without having something like that. I've always got these different projects stacked where here's the long-term project. Here's the one that has to be done this month. Here's the one that's got, 6 months out or whatever. So if I don't feel a little bit of panic, I don't think I'm doing it right. Or like I'm putting it right to the edge where if I don't do this, I'm just going to fail so hard in this thing. Nobody's ever going to want anything from me again.
Do you recall a time where you took on too many projects at one time and it just was like, you knew you kind of effed up?
I've been pretty good about that. I've done a lot of projects that I don't want to show anybody. I've done like educational comic books. I found that my biggest thing was that because I would have a lot of people come to me, and I'm sure you've probably had this in the past, but people come to you and say, could you draw like this? Could you we want to do a comic book like this or a poster like this? I was like, not really. That's not really what I do. And when I figured out that I've always been interested in carpentry and building and rehabbing homes and stuff like that. So I started doing some of that as side work instead of taking on the crappy illustration jobs. Mm-hmm. And then I'm just doing the stuff that I'm passionate about and stuff that I don't want to have to do an educational comic about a watershed council like that. It does nothing to my career to do that. And the money might be okay, but like in the long run, it takes too much out of me emotionally. I feel like I'm like, forsaking myself or something doing this stuff. But that was one of the big things for me. Because I would have that stuff that I didn't want to show anybody, but was making a paycheck, and then still trying to squeeze in personal work, doing like my own comics, and then doing, Decibel or album stuff or t-shirt designs or whatever it might be. So when I kind of weeded out, like, this is what I do. And people don't ask me to draw like anything. That hasn't happened for years now, but that was always, I remember I was at a party somewhere, and somebody's like, oh yeah, Mark's an artist. And they're like, oh, we're looking to get a painting to put behind our our sofa. If you could kind of take these 3 different colors from the room. I was like, that's not what I do. I couldn't paint a flowers like background thing that you see in the hotel. Like, some people do that beautifully, but it's just, when I figured out what I want to do and that's all I'm going to do, then that helped tremendously for me.
Dude, that's like such a good lesson too. And it really is. In my case, I can relate in the sense that, even looking back 3 years, I'm a lot younger in my career, but like I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And there was a year, it might have been COVID year, 2020. I did like 9 pet portraits and I got really good at them. But like, I was like the pet portrait guy. And then I've been like, you know what? meeting other artists in this, metal community, it's made me realize, no, I need to like just do this in my own way and hopefully offer my own unique voice. And it's been a lot more reaffirming. Now, money wise, maybe long term, who knows? But it really is about the passion and what you think that, you're meant to do. So
yeah, and
I can relate.
If you're not stoked about what you're doing, why would you expect anybody else to be?
Yeah.
So I think that's like, people can tell when you're really into what you're doing. And if like you got into pet portraiture and that like did it for you, that's awesome. That's really difficult.
I actually still like them because when you give it to that person, they're ecstatic. Because everyone loves pets. I love pets. So I didn't hate it. And I actually, if I had the time, I would do it. But it's the same kind of thing where it's like limited amount of time because I have job and this. So it's like I'd have to turn them away.
Sure. Yeah, it just comes down like the whole caricature thing kind of fell in my lap because I was working at a gas station doing like the graveyard shift. And I had a great manager where she was basically like, here's all you have to do. You've got this many hours. The rest of the time you can sit and draw in the office. So I would take like People Magazine and Sports Illustrated and try to, capture the likeness, from
nice.
Like 2:30 in the morning till 6:30 in the morning or something. And she'd always be stoked. Oh, what'd you draw tonight? And I'd like, I did like Robert Mitchum and this and that and whatever. So like that really kind of helped. But I was trying to go photorealistic. That back then I was trying to like, are you familiar with like Alex Ross, the comic book painter guy? I was trying to do stuff like that, how he does his grayscale stuff. And I was like, it's cool, but it's not really what I want to do. But I think you just gotta, the biggest thing I wish somebody would tell me is just do exactly what you want to do. People will come to you eventually. It might not be huge, but it's better than like slogging, doing stuff you don't want to do just because you're doing art. I don't know if it's worth it. Some people it might be, but not for me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Coming back to that point though of like learning how to draw people's likenesses and stuff, like that is extremely difficult. It takes a lot of practice, I imagine. But can you kind of speak to like that journey of figuring that out, and also, where do you think you're at now at that particular skill? Like, do you feel pretty confident in it, or do you feel like you still have a ways to go? Just like if you were to assess yourself.
It's tough because like bands that I love and know and I've seen their image for years and years and years, I have a harder time than like, I've never heard of this band. Here's 4 press photos. Try to figure out what they look like. And so, I mean, I definitely have room to grow for sure. I'm pretty confident I can nail most people, but some people, like the people in your mind the best, you've seen the most, are the hardest to nail. Sometimes it's that guy that you have no idea who he is. He's like kind of goofy looking. He's got goofy looking guys are the best to draw with weird hair and frizzy beards and weird shaped faces. But when you get a guy who's just like kind of like a really proportional, good looking guy, that's the most difficult thing to draw properly. I don't really do a whole lot of, I haven't done like a celebrity portrait in years, but one of the things like learning how to, because everybody's seen like the guys at the fair that do the caricatures of the big head and whatever. And they go through like a class to figure all that stuff out. A lot of that stuff is very important, but something this is a very, tangential thing, but people don't know how to characterize facial hair very well. And that if you don't know how to do the facial hair right, like if I was going to do you and I made your mustache and your beard line off from what it really is, it's not going to look right. If I don't make like the mustache connect or how this works down here, that's something I figured out that is a really big deal to capture likenesses, because I'm drawing so many bearded guys in Decibel or any other stuff I'm doing. I would say 90% of the guys have beards or facial hair to some extent. So that whole journey, I think it's just kind of a lot of repetition. I haven't really watched a whole lot of tutorials or read a whole lot about it. For me, doing it was the most, I think helped the most. And because I'm not sitting down and really, doing the oval head and then breaking it up into different things. Cause it doesn't, when you're caricaturizing, that stuff doesn't really matter. It's like, what's the most, like, what's the head shape? What are the ear shapes? What's the nose shape? Preferably if you can get, sometimes like I'm lucky enough to get like a 3/4 and like multiple different images to try to fit, because you can see 4 press photos of a band and the guy looks completely different in each one. Like, what does this guy actually look like? I'm going to like YouTube and like pausing videos and stuff like that too. And I don't think I could do this without the modern like information age that we're in right now.
Yeah.
Because if I have like crappy photos, I can still go to YouTube or Facebook or something and find live shots of the band. It's like, oh, that's how his nose looks. Okay, I got it now. Like back in the day, people had those like morgue libraries of, 3 or 4 different file cabinets just full of like magazine clippings and stuff. It's just,
oh yeah,
this is great because I have my drawing desk and I've got the iPad right there for visual reference stuff, and I can just go in and pull whatever I need to have handy. So this is definitely the golden age to be doing art at all, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like a lot of folks who had been in the prior era all feel the same way. Interesting enough, it's the people who are my age and younger that have legitimate, qualms about what it's like being an artist nowadays. Like they're all very reasonable things, but I do find that a lot of people who had that other life pre-internet, pre-computers, even in some cases, they're all pretty grateful for how things are now.
Yeah, because I've gotten so much work just from people reaching out on Instagram. I stopped. I'll throw my hat in the ring every once in a while, but I don't really try to chase down too much work. Stuff has kind of come to me, not always enough, but I've just kind of catered my life to be so that I don't have to have so much. I've got a fairly simple existence. I don't need to be chasing down stuff constantly and having repeat things like with Blood of Gods and Decibel, like a monthly or quarterly things that you can always count on, and then stuff like I've got other stuff I've been working on I can't talk about yet because it's like a year and a half away. So there's there's so much going on with that stuff, and with not to shamelessly plug it, but coming out in November 19th, I actually have a physical copy of Profane Creations. 172 pages, 11 by 11 inches. This is, I think I could probably send you an EPUB copy of this to let you see the whole thing. But this is basically like would be the perfect thing to give an art director and say, this is what I do.
That's awesome, man. So like those drawings there, like the band drawings, would that be like close to at scale for how you normally would work?
It's pretty close. This is 11, and the normal ones would be 11 tall by 14. So it's almost exact size. And that's was like sweet. The publisher was great to let me go something this large. It doesn't fit in the shelf very well. It's so big, but I wanted to have the largest representation, and not every I kind of put whichever ones are my favorite as the full kind of page things, but. Yeah, that was I wanted to have it close to the size of a record album, just as a vinyl collector as well. So, this is like hopefully the kind of, it's like something you could give somebody who's not. My idea with this wasn't about a retrospective of me necessarily, but of people that enjoy metal that you could flip through and like, oh, I love this band, or I love Black Dahlia or whatever. Like it's something you can just peruse through and get a kick out of. It's not just like my biography or something. There's a little bit of that in the beginning just to kind of let people understand where I'm coming from, but it's not like, and then at age 3 he did these beautiful pictures of this and then he had all these things happening. There's not a whole lot of life in there. It's just about the art and about why I love metal as much as I do.
That's cool, man. And I think after talking to you a little bit, it just seems to fit, the work speaks first. And I mean, clearly you're a fan first type of person, which is awesome. That's, to me, that's what the metal lifeblood, exists on, is a fan first mentality.
Totally.
It has to. There's not enough money. It's about the love.
I've always been, I play drums for fun, but I've never been in like bands, but I wanted to be part of this, extreme metal scene. And, in the 90s, it was doing zines because there was no mainstream, journalism. Ours pretty loose journalism looking back at it, but we were just so enthusiastic about it and wanted to be part of it. And that's still how I feel about it today. It's great to have every month to be able to get the new issue in the mail and see it, and the bands are stoked about it, and it's it's been wonderful. I never would have expected that the two different worlds of comic books and Mad Magazine kind of art and metal would ever come together, but it just took the internet and Decibel Magazine.
So I'm doing the math. If you started in 2009, and this can be very rough on the spot math, but like you must have you done about like 160, 170 illustrations at this point for the bands and the review?
Yeah, it's 16 years. So I've also done other stuff as well. I've done like some other ancillary illustrations and some covers for special issues and stuff too. Mm-hmm. So I think it's probably pushing over 200 at this point.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah, I've done how many different? Was it maybe 4 or 5 different covers? Which that was a nerve-wracking thing as well. But that I think that might have kind of started with my kind of like the Edge of Sanity cover that I did. They wanted a little bit of every bit of their early material kind of turned into this weird collage. And that kind of
like a top 100 death metal albums. You did that one, didn't you?
The metal, black metal, thrash, old school heavy metal, and then there was one with a Danzig cover that I did really early on.
Nice.
But that kind of became a calling card. So people were like, "Oh, could you do, just this big mashup of all, like taking something out of each one of the band's 11 albums or something and make it into some kind of coherent thing?" And that's like going back to 90s stuff. That's like a little bit of the Todd McFarlane in me of the ridiculous amount of detail, but it has to work in a overall composition. It can't just be like mud. But I never thought I'd be doing stuff that detailed and that ridiculous, because I always wanted.
It's tricky, man.
It is. I want to get in and get out quick and dirty, just be done with the piece. And some of these things I can be inking for a week, that large. It's crazy. And I want to try to get it all done in one shot, so you're not like, really good here and fresh, and then down at the bottom, it's wherever you decide to go, it's kind of muddy. And, I don't know if you have those nights where you ink a little bit too much, and then you come back in the morning like, what even happened? I've had somewhere, it was the last thing I just did for Decibel this month. I was exhausted. My son's teething right now, and we're not getting a whole lot of sleep. So we're like in this constant state of, delusion. And I came out the next morning and I thought like a gremlin got in the studio and just like scribbled all over it looked like crap. It's just like, oh my God. So I light boxed the whole thing and redid it. But I have that rarely. If I keep up on my, just the practice, and like inking usually comes pretty easy, but it's the, the pencil stage, the roughs. If I can keep up on that, I'm usually pretty good and consistent. Because the last thing I want to do is look at something, be embarrassed, or look at something that's published and be like, yeah, I could have done a little better. I've got like a certain threshold that I can't go below.
Yeah. And I mean, that's like spoken like a true veteran too, where you might aim to make every piece your best, but there's a realism that they're not all going to be the best, but they just can't be below a certain standard.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm definitely not a perfectionist, but I have like, I've thrown away illustrations, just like, it's not good enough. And it's not because I'm, being like a prima donna, but it doesn't hold up to the work. Because that's what, looking through the book, probably since I would say 2013 on, it's much more consistent as far as tools, as far as just the cartooning. I think it looks more like the same person instead of some of the earlier on stuff. I did like a High and Fire illustration it looks fine, but it doesn't look like the same artist. So I tried to kind of keep everything in this to the stuff where it doesn't look wildly different or wildly too. It was looking way too like 1960. It was like if like a Fantastic Four comic from the 60s, but you're drawing Matt Pike. It just didn't look like my style at all. So
see, now that sounds cool, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Well, if it was more fluid and loose or something, it would work. But yeah.
Well, that's cool, man. Well, let's pop up some of your art we could talk about the technical details and any story behind it, like, working with the band or whatnot.
Yeah.
So this is one of the more recent pieces. Now, that's in terms of it being in the public. Did you create this thing like last year, earlier this year? What was the timing of that?
I think I did it, I think it maybe February of this year, or February, March, something like that. And yeah, this was Dan Swano and his, the guy that's helping put all these reissue records, kind of told me what they wanted to do. And he said he wanted it to look like an old 90s death metal demo. So a little primitive, black and white. They ended up doing kind of a grayish over the top of the whole thing, so it's got a tone to it, which I think it looks better. The logo pops and everything.
Yeah.
And originally I think in the slide you have the original piece as well. It could pop up as well. Yeah, because I was originally I wanted to go so old school that I drew the whole logo by hand, and I was like, oh, this is not smart because we can't reposition anything. And so we went back to I just plopped the other one over the top of it, the digital one over the top. And it was just a little back and forth of, we wanted to have, a couple of the different demo stuff in there. The Kernagia demo that has this, oh God, what's the guy's name?
Not Bosch or
Uranus Bosch piece.
Yeah.
It was like they photocopied it a bunch of times, then like painted on it with a marker. So kind of that piece they wanted that to be the main part, and just like pull stuff from the rest of, that they had 3 or 4 demos at that point. And they dug it, and the only thing that Dan didn't like is there was in the left-hand corner, or a little bit up, there's this kind of horrific looking lady. Now there's eyeballs, but it used to be boobs. And he's just like, lose the tits and it's good.
Class act.
Yeah, I love it. I kind of want to use that as a pull quote sometime, but on something. And then all the Elegy Chapter 1 part, I did that by hand on a piece of paper, and then just scanned it in and kind of put that together. I think for the last at least 15 years, I've tried to do all any kind of typography by hand, and try to avoid using any kind of, Illustrator or fonts or anything. And that kind of goes back to my love of old, comic books, where everything was done, the lettering, everything was done by hand. And it's kind of jarring. Like if you got a really clean style, it might totally work. But I think with my pen ink work, I think it looks better to have a more organic line with the typography as well.
Yeah, I mean, it all fits. I mean, it's a very cohesive cover, man.
Thank you. I did actually some airbrush stuff on that as well, but they didn't like it. But I did on separate pieces of paper.
And then you layered it in digitally or something? Okay.
Yeah. But I think they made the right choice, just keeping it raw. But yeah, that's the full 18 by 18 inch original. Mostly, I would say 99% of it's all done just with the brush pen. And just
18 by 18, that's huge.
Yeah, I used to draw tiny.
Yeah.
And I found this, like, I don't get hand cramps or anything. I've got a lot of artist friends that have had carpal tunnel problems and everything else. And I think drawing larger has really gotten me away from that, and using a brush for most stuff, and not using a little, really small pen. Or I used to use rapidographs, and God, those things are such a pain in the ass. You could get great lines, but then if you didn't clean them, they kind of went bad quickly. And so I just kind of, whatever works and is archival is kind of what I go for. What do you use for whiteout?
Couple things. For like quick little things.
Mm-hmm.
So not like large areas.
Yeah.
These Posca white pens, man.
Are they pretty? They're like hold the color pretty good, or keep they don't bleed through.
No, it's basically just white paint. It's like a $2-3 thing. Yeah. I think I first found them from Ryan Benjamin, the comic artist. He has kind of like a sketchy, kind of messy in a good way style, very expressive. But he'll use these, and then my buddy Jerry goes by Wormwalk on Instagram. He also uses them too. But yeah, I love these things. So if you're just doing like a quick little area, perfect.
And you can ink over the top of it too. Yeah,
just let it dry for like a minute, then you're good. It went out Yeah, it would be fine for brush pen. Maybe something that's a little harder would work better than like a brush, but yeah.
Because yeah,
I would say it's worth experimenting with for sure.
I'll check that out because what I've used before was that the liquid white came in a bottle. It was like it always sucked. I hated it, and then I found out that just white gouache works great for me because I can use that to spatter. It's more opaque,
Yeah,
and I can
use that too.
I can do
The
brush pen.
benefit of this is just it's quick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Gouache, you got to get the little bit of water and then everything out. This is just like I have it right on my desk, and
yeah, I'll try that because I've never found a pen that really could cover anything very well. But I haven't been looking in a while either. I kind of found what has worked pretty well for me.
There's two tools that I feel like a lot of pen and ink artists don't talk about a lot. Here, let me show you. This one I heard about from my friend Christian, who's been on the show. But this is a sand eraser. I use it on Bristol board. You just rub it a little bit, and you basically can lift up an ink line, especially like a micron ink line where it's not like super deep. This is like a $3 thing. Use it all the time.
Look at it.
You can use it for like effects too. Like I did a piece and I wanted like a foggy look where I could still kind of see through a little bit. It was like perfect for it. And then, the Posca white paint pen.
So that's the sand eraser does have a little bit of grit in it. They kind of tears up the paper a little bit. Okay.
You just have to be careful, but I haven't had any issues with it poking through. Now, with that art paper, if it's like recycled, might be a little bit more of a problem, but I haven't had any issues with it. Now, one thing is the shavings from it. I'll lift the paper up and blow on it, but I'll have the shavings still on like the desk, and I have all these scratch marks on my desk now, which I don't care. It's my art desk, but it's got beaten up because of like these little gritty pieces of sand, basically.
Yeah, I've never even heard of those before. That's interesting. Because I've for any kind of effects I've tried to do like that lately is taking a beat up old brush with white gouache and then beat it on a piece of piping paper to get it kind of dry brushy and then kind of try to make straight lines across.
Oh, that's cool.
But there's no going back. But I've gotten pretty good with those type of effects now. I like to add a lot more white than I used. I used to just do it all in black and you try to make little tiny lines. It's so much easier to actually use some white to go back into it and all the spittle marks and stuff in the center of this. And I use a lot of dry brush on this as well.
Do you know he works in comics as well? Guy named Wayshack. Have you ever heard of him?
No, I haven't. No.
I feel like all these effects we're talking about with like white paint and splatter and all that stuff, he's like a modern master at it. I think you'd really like his style.
Awesome. What do you know what books he's working on? Or
he does a lot of covers now.
Okay.
He did like a really cool Howard the Duck cover. He's done, I think he did a Violator, which is like in the Spawn universe cover. But yeah, Wayshack, he's just got a very energetic, expressive style. Like you'll love his style. Maybe not all of his subject matter, but like the techniques, you dig it.
Yeah. No, I'm blown away by a lot of I see how young some of these young comic artists are and how like fully formed they are.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, I was, at their age, I couldn't draw anything. It was terrible. But yeah, some of these like doing monthly books, it's all digital and it looks as energetic as anything drawn on paper. And it's be amazing. Like growing up with all the tutorial videos and stuff, like that's something that YouTube is, it's unbelievable. Me and my dad talk about this all the time about just like, oh, what did you watch on YouTube this week to figure out how to fix this or how this works or, so it can be, you can just watch, trash. But there's like so much educational, like good, it's like a modern encyclopedia for almost anything. I'll watch like having to fix something on a tractor. I had no mechanical, background at all. And I watched 3 videos. I was like, oh, that's not too big of a deal. I think I can do that. Swap this little thing out and boom, there you go. So yeah, I think that
feels good, man. Being able to fix a tractor like that's a good feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. But like what you're doing here is like, it's a great resource for people to be able to talk about stuff that used to be, you'd keep it kind of close to the vest and you wouldn't, it was like a trade secret. If I tell people, then they're all going to do it too. It's like, yeah, but it's not going to look like what you do. everybody's going to have their own voice. So I think before I did the Requiem podcast, I did a podcast it started in 2006. It was called Art and Story, where it was just breaking down the craft of making comics, what goes into certain things. And it's just, I've always loved talking about this stuff. I think it's so great to be able to commiserate with people about, your chosen field that you want to be in.
Absolutely.
It's like talking sports with somebody.
Well, yeah, in art and illustration, it's a solo profession. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you get the chance to talk to somebody else who's as nerdy about it as you are, it's always a good time.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I love the fact that it's just me. I don't want to have it be collaborative. I've done collaborative comics in the past, and it always seems like that I always have more stuff to do than the writer.
Yeah.
Like, okay, and then I'm embellishing all their stuff to make it better. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do all this stuff myself. I don't need these guys.
Yeah. So this is a Blood of Gods and the airbrush techniques and stuff, and then the digital coloring on the right. And I actually just got this in the mail yesterday.
Awesome!
Physical.
Awesome.
Yep.
I've got that along with a case of wine coning.
Oh, nice.
So that's part of my.
That's part of your payment.
My payment. I get paid, and then I get a case of wine.
Hey, not a bad deal, man.
It's a pretty good deal. But yeah, this was just obviously bolt thrower, Warhammer 40K inspired, which that's what got me into death metal. Was I was playing Warhammer 40K, and then I saw the advertisement for bolt throwers Realm of Chaos. I was like, what the hell is this? This has got to be crazy. And then that's the first time I ever heard like super deep guttural death metal vocals. And I was like, all right, this is amazing. So Stacy, the guy that puts the magazine together, got a hold. Like, the great thing about our relationship is he's like, all right, I want to do something like Mad Max. It's like, all right, awesome. It's just like every month is a different genre, like movie genre. And I'm doing like character design. I'm doing environmental design. It's a really, really fun process. And there's not a whole lot of, he's just like, here's this, go with it. I like to have X, Y, and Z in there, but it's not prescriptive. That's how Decibel is as well. We had maybe in the first two I did, there might've been a little bit of criticism, but now it's just like, cool, thanks. Every month.
Perfect.
Yeah. To have that kind of like find the right people to work with, or just, I've got a t-shirt guy or screen printing guy that I use for everything, because I can just give it to him. He does a great job every single time. Like having those professional relationships with people where you're just like, all right, this is the dude I need. There we go. So this, I just kind of went crazy with it. It's every one I kind of go more and more detailed, which is stupid, but in trying to make it so there's like a point of focus is kind of where that airbrush helped a lot. Like just above the central character there, I put that friskator on them and kind of tried to fade them into the background. And once you throw the digital coloring on it, it's a little more subtle, but I think it kind of adds a little bit more depth. Same with the guys in the foreground, try to, blast them a little bit with that as well. But this is, this was just kind of like, my 14-year-old self, like what I imagined Warhammer would be, just a bunch of violence. There's like a guy getting his head chopped in half with a chainsaw and knives and heads and all kinds of stuff happening here.
This is such an impressive piece though, man.
Thank you.
Just kind of geeking out about like the technical details, like masterful line weights to convey depth. And then that was such a smart decision having that airbrush. I mean, sure, you could have like hatched it or done other techniques, but it looks so cool with that soft look. So your eyes immediately go to those characters right up in the front with the dark shadows on the shoulder, and then that mid character where the action's coming out of. So it's just like, it's a very, very impressive piece. Like, I really dig it, man.
Yeah, it's like I always try to. I think it was in like drawing comics the Marvel way. I don't know if you've seen that book. Came out.
I have it. Yeah,
probably the 70s. And I had the video as well. John Buscema going through and sounded like the crotchiest old man ever going through how things worked. But it was always the foreground, middle ground, background, and then doing photography classes in college. Same thing. Like having some kind of thing, and also like for comics, it helped because you could have a tree in the foreground, so you only had to draw a third of the panel with action in it, but it pushed you right into that action that you wanted to see too. So that's kind of always in my mind, is some kind of foreground character, middle ground, background. The background stuff, I'm still trying to figure out how to atmospherically. I did a little bit of dry brush on some of those guys, kind of over the top, but I'm thinking about trying to do next time I do something that has this kind of depth to it is to try white in the airbrush and go over the top of it that way and see how that works out. It almost might look like a screen or something.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. When it comes to the airbrush, then are you basically just reducing a black down really, really low, or using gray paint? Or
yeah, I was just using what is the water that we're using? It's my wife uses it for soap making and stuff, distilled water. So it doesn't have any minerals or anything that will get clogged up in there, but just distilled water. And then a tattoo artist friend of mine gave me this, it's called Talons ink. It's an India ink.
Okay.
And just, I filled up the tiniest little thing on there with, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of it was water and then maybe like 3 drops of ink or something. It was just kind of gut instinct. I'm still trying to figure it out a little bit. And then a fairly aggressive spray on it. Nothing too fine. But I haven't really this is the only kind of stuff I really messed with the airbrush, but I'd like to get better so I can figure out how to make the spray pattern like the guys in the front, if it was a little bit more, bigger drops or something to make it almost look like benzene dots or something across it. But I'm really enjoying it so far.
What about, have you experimented with using like Zipatone or deleter sheets ever? I feel like you would have a really cool application of that stuff.
I actually have some of that stuff, but I have so little of it and it's so expensive anymore.
Yeah.
At least stuff I've been looking for. So I just scan it in and do it that way. But I used to do Zipatone I think it was in high school. It was the last time I really did it much. And I kind of felt, I actually, the newspaper used it a fair amount, or would use dot, like when you had you took a photograph that was going to be on the front page and you needed to break it up into a dot pattern. They'd throw a dot screen over it or something. And I've used stuff like that to scan in and kind of like just, layer over the top of drawings and stuff too. But I haven't tried much of it modern. I think I dig it. Is there any modern companies still making it?
Only one I'm familiar with is Deleter, which is like mostly used by manga artists.
Yeah.
I also like the Deleter inks. Like the most solid black I've ever used ink-wise is this black number 4. The thing is, it's like thick as shit. It literally is like black paint, man. But it's matte and just like solid. So like I like it for that case, but it's hard to get the nice like whip strokes that you can get with like India ink.
Are you finding it just using it for like large fill areas?
Yeah, for the most part. Or like on smooth Bristol, I'm getting better with it, but I tried using it on like some watercolor paper and it's just like, it just feels so unsatisfying to brush with. You know what I mean? It's just like pushing through the teeth. It just feels terrible.
I used to use Black Magic early on, and I don't know if they changed their formulation or not, but that stuff's terrible now. I used to have a shared studio space with a friend of mine years ago, and anytime we'd get a new thing of Black Magic, we'd open it up and leave it on the desk for 2 days to let it evaporate a little bit, and then eventually it would come to the right consistency. But stuff is just not that. Talons is the best stuff I've found as far as like super black. I'm not even sure if it's available. I've had the bottle for years because I barely ever use it, but I'm not using it in dip as much as I used to. Have you ever tried using like refilling any of the brush pen things with like any other kind of ink?
No,
the cartridges.
Not those. There was a time when I was like trying to do more like a traditional tattoo style, and I got like water brushes and for like spit shading. But I decided that was not my. I'll let them do that. That's not my. Yeah. I love the look. Like beyond like comics and shit, I like to collect like vintage tattoo books. But just it's not authentic me. You know what I mean? To like do that shit.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it.
Multiple people say like, "Oh, you should do tattoos." I was like, "Nah, I got too many friends that are tattoo artists that I hear horror stories about." So like, nah, I'll just stick with illustration.
Yeah, I'm with you. But there's still some of the best people to hang out with, man. And like I always feel at home at a good tattoo shop, man. That's one of my favorite places, dude.
Oh yeah, nobody's ever had a bad time usually.
Yeah, it's just like the stupidest conversations and
Oh, everybody's busting each other's balls, and it's always fun.
Yeah. All right, so this is the comparison we were talking about earlier. Yes. So we got 2010 versus 2018, and even then, like you've even evolved since 2018. I'd say, like, to be even a little bit looser in like a good way.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that because I haven't seen this one. That was the first 2010 is the first At the Gates one that I did, which is kind of a homage to the inside of the Slaughter of the Soul. I think it was the inside band photo. And it was just like 1,000 beer cans, and now they're 15 years older or something. But this is all done on Bristol. I think all the bottles were done, and the tattoos were done with a 102 mapping point. And then this was still using the Series 7 brush, the Winsor Newton brush, and then the same typical kind of cell shaded Photoshop thing. But the color theory is pretty hideous. That was probably been the hardest thing, is to try to really work on color theory, like understanding which comic books is great at. You've got Spider-Man with his different color scheme, and the bad guy's got an opposite color scheme, and that's kind of how I figured out what complementary colors were as a kid. And now it's like actually looking in Photoshop using the little color picker, like what's the opposite of that? Like, oh, this looks way better than if I would go something over here. So I can definitely see a difference in. I've always tried to have kind of muted color as well, but and exaggerated faces. Like, I don't think Adrian looks too great on the left there, but then I've drawn him 4 or 5 times now, so now I kind of understand what his face looks like. And like the twins were incredibly difficult for me to draw back then too, in Tampa. But yeah, this is definitely a big jump. It's nice to see the difference in 8 years.
Totally, man. I think it's just the stuff that you're doing now. It's full of life. You know what I mean? Like you feel it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this the earlier stuff is a little stiff. It's trying to show life.
Even then, it's still solid work, but yeah, you've come a long way, man. And it's when you mentioned Jack Davis earlier, it's like the more I see your work, the more I like. Yeah, it's like death metal Jack Davis, and then obviously your own thing. But like I can see that that's one of your primary influences, and what a good one to like draw from.
I loved how he could do anything. He could do like disgusting horror comics. And then he could do like Jimmy Carter on the cover of Time magazine, or he could do, any kind of movie parody stuff. Like he was he did a bunch of, what was it, like football mascot stuff for his alma mater. Like across the board, he could just do great stuff. And it was, more so it was just, you'd recognize it was him immediately. And that's kind of, I guess, subconsciously been something where I've always wanted to just to do my thing on whatever. It doesn't always have to be, metal. But as long as I can kind of do my take on whatever, it's great. I love it. But he's definitely he's on the he's top 3. I got two Jacks and a Mort.
No, and I mean it only as a compliment, because like what a good person to like study from, and you can tell that it was like years ago when you were like really trying to get your chops up. So
yeah, no, that's the biggest compliment anybody could ever tell me. Oh, I see a little bit of Jack Davis in your work. It's like, well, thank you.
Speaking of Jack Davis, I actually don't have any art books of his. Do you have any recommendations?
I do. I can grab one real quick.
Yeah, he'd be someone I'd like to have on the shelf to pull from.
I don't know how much this costs now, but Fantagraphics put this out probably, how many years ago? Maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
It goes through his entire career of movie posters, back to historical book stuff, Teddy Roosevelt fighting,
that looks excellent.
Stuff very totally different styles, but you see the energy and the anatomy is always the same in his stuff.
What's the name of that one?
Jack Davis, A Career Retrospective.
And that's Fantagraphics?
Is it Fantagraphics? I thought so.
Yeah, that looks excellent.
Yeah, Profane graphics. It's a nice oversized book as well, but that's the best one I have of him. There's a couple other ones you can find on Amazon. I think one of them is a bootleg, but and I've got a bunch of the collected EC stuff and Eerie and a lot of that as well.
Yeah, I've seen that, and a lot of those like artist editions too, where you can see like the whiteout and all the notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like those new ones.
Yeah,
and those are very tall books, I believe.
Yeah, the one I've got's almost 3 feet tall.
Crazy, man.
I have like another section where they're leaned up against the wall because they're too big to go anywhere.
Oh, man. I'm one of those collectors that like it kind of drives me nuts when it won't fit on the shelf. Like I get very like fixated on that stuff, man. I wish I wasn't that way, but I get very like condition of books. Like
yeah,
I have some books that are beat up, and it's like, okay, I'll justify it in my head like why they're beat up. But man, I like if I have the option to buy something that's in like very good defined condition, I'll pay extra for it because it drives me nuts. If like something's,
I agree with that. Yeah, like having I don't usually loan much stuff out either because people don't have the same respect for the the thing. Like I kept this in really good shape since I got it. I want it to stay that way. It's full of sticky notes because I went through it at some point. It was like had something to say about all this stuff. But no, I love having a nice physical library of things because the internet's great. But what if at some point certain sites don't have everything you want anymore? Same with like I have physical media of DVDs and Blu-rays and CDs and LPs and all that kind of stuff. It's just I like to have whatever I really love. I want to have a physical copy of it.
Yeah. What I'll have to do is I'll flip through to find like reference and inspiration, and then I just take a shitty cell phone picture, and then I'll use that in the moment if I like need to be like, oh, how did he do this texture here? Okay, I'll draw from that. You know what I mean?
Oh,
but
yeah.
Like having it's just organized too. Like my phone, all my reference stuff is very not organized. So when I have the books, it's already built in to be organized.
Yeah, I think with I don't sync my phone with my iPad. So whatever project I'm working on, it's mostly just photos of that in there, and I delete everything else because I don't put anything in albums or anything. My phone's like I just have to keep scrolling to find that. I'll take a screenshot of something on Instagram I think is cool, or just like throw stuff on my desktop computer. Like, oh, this guy's what's his name, Matt Smith. He does stuff with Mignola, I believe. He did this Viking Lord comic, just this great kind of Spartan illustration style. And he did something, I just like threw it on my desktop. It's been there for like 3 months. Just like, that's just a really cool way he, pieced that whole thing together. So yeah, I'm constantly doing that, but I also don't have a very organized way of keeping it on my devices.
So this from that zine you were showing me earlier, the Requiem?
Yeah, this is that's my first caricature of a metal person I ever did. 1993. Supposed to be Maddie Karki of Dismember. I had friends back in the day thought it was amazing. Looking at it now, I can't really tell who it is, but I just want to show some very early stuff I was putting in the zine that was kind of, same kind of cartoony illustration style. And I think the next one over was like our staff page for the next issue. And I was always pretty happy with the weird crucified guy with the Eric Larson looking
hands. That's a killer illustration, man. Like the pose and and then like that solid black on the underside of the wing of that vulture. Like, that's really nice, man.
Well, the crotch,
that one holds up.
Oh, thank you. The crotch area of where I this little dress, that's a total Rob Liefeld thing, where it looked like everything just got like vacuum sealed to your crotch, and it doesn't really adhere to the rules of folds or anything. But that was all done with a ballpoint.
If you put enough folds, it all covers it up.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I just did that ballpoint pen on a piece of typing paper.
Yeah. Oh, despite the crotch, it's a good piece. I know what you mean.
That's the 90s right there, so that was cool. And this is the most recent Decibel illustration. And you can kind of see where I was doing more of the airbrush work on the tombstones. It actually looks probably better than it adds more richness, I think, after throwing that color onto it. But it does take an incredibly long amount of time to put all the frisket on and mask it out. But I kind of want to bring more and more analog processes to these illustrations to make them more desirable. Because also, like, bands buy the originals from me.
Chase told me he bought any appearance Gatekeepers had. He's bought from you.
I think he's bought 3 from me so far.
Yeah, he's very proud of it. He was talking on the episode. He's a big collector as well, man. Good dude.
He gave me probably the best pull quote I have in the back of the book. That is getting drawn by Mark Rudolph is a rite of passage in modern extreme metal. I was like, wow, that's
fucking concise and good.
That's awesome. It's like perfect. He said that on Instagram or something. I messaged him like, hey, can I use this on the back of the book? He's like, absolutely. It's like, all right, cool.
That's awesome.
But this is one of those bands I've drawn. This is, I think, the 3rd time I've drawn them. I've seen them a bunch of times and big fan of their work too. So I wanted to be this time there's a lot of drastic change in their look too. So I wanted to make sure I got, like, haircuts and, the Dave Vanian kind of thing going on with some of these dudes. But, and I always try to do these, there's this Iron Maiden, like, best of thing that was called Best of the Beast. And it came out in, was it like 96 or 97 when they're remastering all those records. It was kind of like some B-sides and whatever. And there's a bunch of weird, like, unseen photos. And there's a picture of Dave Murray, the guitarist, and Steve Harris, the bass player, where they're standing with these stupid T-shirts that say, one's like, no, we're not an English rock band. We're dental floss salesmen from Montana or something. So I was trying to put these stupid T-shirts, slogans that have some kind of something to do with the bands, some kind of like inside thing on a song title or whatever it might be. So that ever since I saw that, I always tried to work those into each illustration if I can.
That's cool, man. I'm very excited to listen to the new Tribulation album. I kind of have fallen off, but not because I don't like what they're doing. More like for some reason I just haven't grabbed towards it since like 2022. So I guess it hasn't been that long. But like if they're doing something different, I'd be curious to listen to it. So
yeah, it's much. It all makes sense with like their trajectory, because I've kind of been on board with them since that first death metal record they did, which was just like a breath of fresh air at the time. And then when like Formulas of Death came out, it was super weird. I was like, okay, these guys are, every record they're sounding different. And then they, kind of hit and kind of really like defined their sound. That's kind of been refining from then. But then they lost like a major songwriter, performer. I don't know if you ever saw them live before.
Yeah, I have. In 2019.
Okay, it was just unbelievable live performance. It's like, like this performance art David Bowie thing going on. It's like, I've never seen a metal band have this kind of presence. They played at the small town I lived in that was within Detroit called Hamtramck, this little Polish town. This bar had maybe 30 people in it, and they had their full backdrop that was so big that they had to roll it up so you couldn't even see the whole thing. And they still put on one of the best shows. That, like, they're always put on great shows, but they played like they're playing to thousands of people. This great band.
Oh yeah. Quick question. So on the finish then with the colorized, you do have to like figure out how you do like the lighting and shadow of the face, but you don't do that in the raw analog drawings because you don't want to have like the hatchings and stuff. It's not part of your style. But like, is that a kind of a difficult part of the process for you, like that lighting and effect area, or you just kind of have done it enough times that it's pretty natural?
Well, I understand how like the planes of the face kind of work in a simplified way. Yeah. But if you look at this technically, there's no way a light source would make any of this work right. Like everybody has their own, like, there's some rim lighting here, but how is there rim lighting on this guy, on the other, guys? Like it's all kind of just, smoke and mirrors. There's nothing.
It's like partially realistic.
How the shape of the face works. And I was like, well, what best suits, this really skinny guy? It's better to have a little bit more, I think, structure to the face. So a lot of that, I don't really think about that till I get down to it. And that all kind of comes from love of animation too. Like,
Yeah.
Bruce Timm, Batman animated series kind of stuff where it's super like simplified cell shading. And I guess, manga and stuff too, to some extent.
Definitely.
At least 90s stuff. I haven't kept up too much, but I've always liked that look. And because usually Mad Magazine was all done, it was all black and white, and there'd be different, tones and stuff. But the root of it probably comes from animation, I think.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. All right, then we got the cover and the original drawing there.
Yeah, this one's 18 by 18. I was just trying to come up with a cover that, like, who's one of the most identifiable, heavy metal people, and King Diamond's up there. And I did a series of tribute books. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but it's like a tribute to Merciful Fate, tribute to Celtic Frost, tribute to Judas Priest. But it's all just a bunch of different cartoonists doing their take on, could be lyrics, could be whatever. I've got actually got right here. This is the Metal Gods, Judas Priest one, and it's everything from like comics to, I was interpreting song lyrics into comic form. Then there's different like stories from, the dude from Sirith Ungol is doing a story about how he first met Rob Halford. Sam did one with about Celtic Frost. Same kind of type of stuff there. So King Diamond is also, this was like one of the first things I did in this style that was just my own thing that wasn't associated with Decibel or anything. So he kind of got the main, I guess, the place of honor on the cover when I was trying to figure out like what to do for, all these millions of things. Everything else kind of came down to who's recognizable, who is like just bands I love. Like to the right of the logo is everybody from Bolt Thrower and Dismember, caricatures of them. Throughout, you can see a little bit of the Altars of Madness, Dan Seagrave,
Bathory, Slayer.
Yeah,
you got the Arise guy, Obituary.
Yeah,
I recognize most, and maybe I'll be called a poser, but I don't. That little like doll guy next to King Diamond. Who is that?
Oh, that's I have my dad's 1948 Howdy Doody ventriloquist dummy hanging on my wall in my studio. So that's why it's there.
Okay, I was like, what's the metal reference?
There's no metal reference at all. So yeah.
That was the opportunity to call me a fucking poser and like be like, if you don't know, I'm logging off right now. That's been funny as shit. Okay, good.
Everything else is just kind of like bands I've worked with, people, kind of notorious, people like, we got Danzig in there, and some tributes to people that died, like Eric Wagner and LG Petrov, that passed away, and just stuff I've always dug. Band like Cathedral and Paradise Lost make it in there a couple times, and the little pieces that are pasted up on the bottom of the original art is the Danzig head and the Halford that I just kind of, once I kind of scanned it in, I was like, I need a couple more guys, and I just kind of digitally threw them in there, but I pasted them on there. If I ever sell it, I can have those original pieces like that too. But
interesting.
Yeah, so it's basically all the stuff I love, metal wise.
Very, very cool. And I'll put the link in the description. But I did see you actually can buy it off Amazon. But is there a preferred place for you and the publisher to buy this book?
And you can get Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold, you can order it. So I get the same cut no matter where you get it. I might do something a little bit later once I get all my comp copies, and I might do something with a book plate. That'd be some kind of like artist edition, quote unquote. But I don't really know what kind of time frame that would be. I will, but it'll be available, on my site. So I would have everybody go to Amazon if you're interested and pre-order. You get the pre-order guarantee, and it's supposed to be November 19th is when it comes out. I'll be stoked. A lot of my family, extended family, is getting together for Christmas. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna bring all of our copies so you can, come and sign it. You need to have a signing for this thing." I was like, "Okay, we'll see." There will be The only planned one right now is the Decibel Fest in Denver.
Okay.
On the 7th of December will be the last time Sir Thungul plays, maybe in the United States. I'm not sure. But I'm going to be doing a signing there as well for the book.
Nice. Sounds like a fun trip.
What's that?
Sounds like a fun trip.
Yeah, it's going to be, because I've never seen them. I've done some work with them. I'm really stoked to do that. And I mean, just to get flown anywhere to do anything is always nice. But to be able to see metal and, you know, see some bands you enjoy, that's going to be great.
Oh, yeah, man.
These are, I threw these on just as kind of some different. This is the Service for a Vacant Coffin. There's a piece that went in an Autopsy. It's called After the Cutting. It was a thing Peaceful put out that was kind of a best of with a bunch of interviews and stuff in it. And I was going back and forth with Chris Reifert at the time, and he really dug my stuff. And he's like, would you like to do a couple pieces for this? And I just wanted to make like some literal interpretation, like Mad Magazine versions of, you know, some of the album titles. So this, I was always fond of this one because it's just disgusting. This poor family that, you know, lost their mother. And meanwhile, you know, Chris Reifert has the priest sitting there with her severed head while this guy's gutting her in the background. But just to do this kind of like, it's very reflective of EC, where it's, you know, a lot of humor, but also just disgusting, which I always appreciate. And the piece to the right was I was doing the subscription box thing for like horror related stuff. So this was like a Carrie piece. I did a handful of these. I did like one with Seinfeld and just a bunch of weird caricature stuff. But I'm always game for that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to do more, you know, movie poster ish or, you know, Hollywood based stuff is fun as long as I like the subject matter.
Yeah. And I don't know. I just love these pieces too, because you got the story, but also the expressions are like perfect. You just feel it all. You know what I mean? Like in all this, it's, if any like non-artists are watching or whatever, like this, doing really good cartooning is like very, very difficult. And I think sometimes people don't get that because like
clear cartooning. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's I mean, there's
and like realism is challenging too in its own way, but in some ways you have like, you know, you have very clear reference and you know when you're right or wrong kind of a little more with realism. Whereas with this, there's a lot more trial and error. And then it's kind of a Goldilocks moment when you got it right. So I don't know.
Yeah. When you're not pushing it too far, there's got to be some kind of moment in it where you believe what you're looking at. It's not just a complete, you know, literal cartoon. Like you can tell these people are grieving.
With the Carrie piece on the right there, you know, it's like, it comes back to like comic book art, but like all that negative space of the, like Carrie herself, right? Like you have the pen lines for the eyes, the brows, the nose, the lips, but like the way I would do it is, okay, I would have very slight shading for the underneath of the nose, and then, you know, slight hatching in all these places, and it would be a whole different look. It would look more like how Robert Crumb would probably approach it, honestly.
Yeah.
For that, but because that would just be my natural way of going about it. But like, there's something just confident and bold about just none of that fussiness. It's just like every line's in the right spot. It's so difficult.
I did put another layer of spattered blood.
Oh, really?
Over the top of it in the digital coloring. But I tried to keep the caricatures of everybody else, like, you know, John Travolta and some of these other dudes, to have as few lines as possible, just to really, you know, sell it. Because I think it's 11 by 14 piece, but I wanted I think on that one especially, like I really got into doing caricatures of the hair.
Yeah.
And the shape of the heads, and I didn't want to do too many different like take away from the negative space on the faces, I think.
It's cool, man. Very cool. And then I included these because I wanted just to show a little more like the raw drawings there. You got the blue line on the left, and that's Napalm Death, right? This was
one of the Metal Hammer ones. It's Shane from Napalm Death. And then it was the article was about, I don't remember what the article or it was like a column every month. There'd be a different musician would write about something. And this was like talking about bands that didn't have any original members anymore. So it's like
Michael got Ackerfeld.
Yeah, and then Andreas Kisser from Sepultura, and Anders Frieden from In Flames.
Yeah.
And that was all done on Bond copy paper with brush pen and blue line. I needed to get it done quick. And this was what year? This is 2017. So I was doing like handyman work and stuff as well. So I was going back and forth between, like if I was in the mode to do I would do Decibel and this all in the span of a week or something. Mm-hmm. And the thing on the right was a piece I did for an art show in Kentucky that was just about 80s horror movies, and it's about John Carpenter's The Thing. I ended up doing it was a line drawing, and then I went over it with watercolor. And it's a pretty interesting piece. Actually, the publisher of the book, Jeremy Wagner, he bought that original piece off me. But I scanned it, and I've got like prints and stuff available still. But I've always loved that movie, and I actually did the Kurt Russell piece in the center I redid the face so it looked a lot better. But that was just a fun challenge to try to come up with. There's 1,000 Thing posters. But to get every character in the movie, because there's only, all those guys just stuck up there, and then the different random monster bits, but kind of make that all kind of an amorphous outline.
Yeah. Very cool. And then when you're approaching pencils like nowadays, like how, on a scale of like 1 to 10, loose being like 0 and like almost nothing, and then 10 being like every ink line is going to be penciled first. Like, what is kind of your approach nowadays with that kind of
It's
duality?
probably like maybe a 6. I'm pretty loose. As long as I got a good framework, I kind of figure most of the real lines out, the final lines out. I don't ever do any like line weights or anything like that. For something like this was all done just on a piece of paper. Now when I do Decibel or any type of caricature work, usually I go straight to paper. But with something like larger, like the book cover, for instance, I started that in Procreate, so I could still draw the stuff and move it around if I wanted to and make it bigger or smaller. Okay. And then typically I will take that and blow it up to whatever size and take it into what's the Adobe program, Acrobat, I think. And then I can tile it out, print it out, and then blue line or a light box underneath the paper so I can tighten everything up. But I found that the Procreate for like larger pieces where I'm like potentially moving stuff around is a lot better than erasing. And because I used to be like, oh, you can't erase, you got to draw the whole thing. It's like, well, sometimes you did this part great. Why would you want to waste the time to try to redraw it? It's just like a weird pride thing. But so I think Procreate's probably the best innovation in illustration and cartooning that's come in the last 20 years, as far as I can.
Yeah.
I don't like drawing digitally in it, but I love doing digital pencils in it. I think is great. The Apple Pencil is great. I had a thing similar to a Wacom years ago, and it just never worked right. And this is perfect. It's easy, and it's a time saver, and you can bring it wherever you're at to do it. But I still don't like digital inking at all. I might do a little bit if I have to do a touch up of something, but very, very rare.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the last one. Just want another example of Blood of Gods there. How many covers have you done for them now?
10.
10. Wow.
Yeah, the Bolthor one was I think there's a kind of a faint X in the background behind everything on the newest issue. So that's the 10th issue. And this was, I don't remember what this was, maybe 4. But this was a wraparound cover. Mm-hmm. So that's probably, I don't think I drew this one quite as big. This might be 14 by 14 tops. So these, the concern is trying to figure out how to have a compelling cover, and then what can you throw in the background to still kind of, make it all come together. And it's still, foreground elements all there. And then just a bunch of, then there's the midground and the background of all the ridiculous, like, I don't even know what this gives me like a one sentence thing, and I just kind of go for it. I think I don't remember what I was looking at, but it might have been some cartoon or something with the weird, like just all the hoses everywhere and this thing falling down in the background. And the color scheme was all from He-Man, the He-Man Origins stuff that came, like all the primary colors and stuff like that. I was like, I don't know what to do for the color scheme. I was like, looked behind me. I was like, oh, I got some. Let's just do a He-Man color scheme. So that's what this was. But yeah, that was another just bonkers fun one to do, the genetically modified grapes that went bad.
And then I like this one. We got that Corbin tribute.
I think that was part of was that just on Instagram?
Yeah, I just pulled it off there.
Okay. I think so. That's probably when he died, I believe. Mm-hmm. Those books, I don't know if you ever checked out his stuff, but
yeah, I have a little bit of it. But if you have any recommendations, I have like Den, the first one.
Okay, they have the first 4 out right now.
Okay,
from Dark Horse, they're gonna basically any of those I would pick up. If his art is bonkers and beautiful, and it's hard to tell what he uses to make his art.
Yes,
it sometimes looks digital, it looks airbrushed, but it was done in the 70s. It's
he used digital stuff later, but like he had like a sense of 3-dimension and form that like no one else had. Like everything looked like it was all models that he like painted. It's kind of nuts.
Well, I know Den was based on him looking in the mirror.
Okay.
Minus the huge dong and the rippling muscles. It's such a weird. I've only read the first one so far, but it's just like the imagination, and there was like no filter on anything.
Yeah,
I just love that stuff. But it was for a thing I was doing. This is going to be coming out, I think next year, is another Repulsion book, is like the complete history of Horrified. Nice. I've got so many pieces. It's going to be more of it's like an oral history mixed with, I have tons of photos, every band flyer, every show, and interviews from everybody that was around, even peripherally at the time. So it's going to be a pretty interesting, totally different than the art book. But I did a couple kind of like little intermezzo things where it's doing like kind of like a lyrical interpretation in comic form. There could kind of be like chapter breaks or something. I might have redone it. I'm not sure, but that's what originally this was for.
Yeah. Beyond the Corbin tribute, I love the inking on this piece in particular. Like, there's so many good lines and like high contrast, good shadows. Like, I just love looking at this stuff because it feels so fulfilling to like lay down like a good ink area. Like, that's one of the best feelings,
Yeah.
It's like I just feel that looking at this, like that shadow on the neck there, and then dude, those like awesome lines on the bicep and shoulder, like that it's like writes into me in like the best way.
Yeah, the writes like Frankenstein kind of stuff.
God, it looks so, or like Kelly Jones did like some work for Batman, and then
he did the whole
Sandman.
Didn't he?
Yeah, I love Kelly Jones' approach, man. That awesome shape maker.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, let's go. I'm glad you're such a comic guy as well. I'm not up on modern stuff as much, but I just, that's where most of my influence, I think, it comes from, is comic books, really.
It hasn't been there my whole life, honestly. It's been just talking with people and then just finding really good artists and then figuring out their pedigree and like where they've come from and stuff. And I mean, I've been reading pretty actively the last like 2 years, but it wasn't something that I grew up with. Besides, I did read a lot of like, some of the classic stuff, like, Kirby and Stanley and all that stuff. Cause I basically inherited my dad's 60s and 70s comic collection. So like I was exposed to like that stuff, but I don't know. There's just a ton to draw from in comics, and like the energy of it is something that I'm always trying to do in my own way. Even if I'm going for like the real detailed stuff, like you can still have things be energetic and flow well.
For sure. I think that even if you don't read like half the time I get these old collections and I'm just looking at them. I'm looking at the line work and seeing like what was possible and, what I might be able to, mimic or some kind of technique. And, because I grew up as a comic guy and cartoons and toys and all that, but, the like keeping up on like modern comics has not been a real, thing I've I've done. It's just we're in also a wealth of like all this collected stuff again. You don't have to try to go track down old issues of Den, which I do have the original one I found pretty cheap, but just to get all these like comprehensive collections of all this stuff is so awesome to be like, well, I need to, I'm doing some kind of inking thing where I need to like, how did Jack Davis do like wood texture or something? And here we go. Like shaded wood texture looks amazing. And it's only just like a bunch of scratchy lines, but he still understood how the grain worked and all that. Nothing ever like, takes too much focus away. But
totally, man. As you're wrapping up, just final question would be like, what would be your advice for somebody kind of maybe trying to find their way into this industry of just being an illustrator, or you could kind of combine, or just somebody who wants to like improve at maybe a faster pace at their art skill? So either question, what would you say?
I think, well, as far as getting into the what do you like? I think you have to know what you want to do. If you know you want to, like, I just want to be a t-shirt designer. I think figure out what you really love and focus on, and not try to be a jack of all trades, because that I think dilutes your progress, and nobody's gonna like remember you if you're not doing like, he's like, oh, you're the guy that did that Pig Destroyer shirt that was crazy or whatever. Like, make a name for yourself doing something that you love, and people will come to it. And try to keep it as focused as possible, but not on like necessarily genre or anything, but like, what do you want to draw? Like, your stuff could be used for all different types of things, not just specifically metal. It could be book covers or t-shirts or, gig posters, all kinds of stuff like that. But I think just figuring out what your voice is and what you want to do, and not trying to run down trends or run down what seems to be popular. Because if you stick with it long enough, you'll eventually be on top of the curve that becomes something. Just pure longevity will get you there. So if you're doing it for a long time and nobody really seems to care, and then it kicks in eventually, if you stick with it and you love it. Because if you love it, don't try. I think also try to not just do it as a job where you're taking stuff that you don't want to do, that you don't like, that you're ashamed to show people. Like, comic artists in the 80s were always like, doing like porno comics and stuff too, that they have some kind of pseudonym just to make some extra bucks. But like,
heard they paid pretty well at the time.
Probably all right. But I think I'd rather like dig a ditch for a couple days a week and then, draw on the weekends or something than draw porno comics or educational comics for something I don't care about. But that's looking back at what I've done. It's been a very slow, I think you've got a more interesting career. If I had a career where I peaked really early, it'd be I don't know how that works after that. Like, so I've had a very, very slow kind of, rise this way, very, very on a bell curve, very, very slowly upward. But you do something long enough that you love and people eventually find it. I don't think this is an industry anybody gets into for being rich. I think you need to just love what you're doing. It's a kind of a cliche, but if you don't love what you're doing, then nobody else is going to.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, dude, this was a pleasure. This was easy conversation, and we definitely draw from a lot of similar things, which is really cool. But for everybody watching, you can check out Profane Creations coming out next month, probably just like week or two after this airs. Follow Mark on Instagram. Of course, support the publications that his work is part of, Blood of Gods and Decibel. And beyond that, hopefully new episodes just about every week. Thank you, everybody. See ya.